to be used in an employment tribunal. 6 of Mr. Williams' colleagues said they'd witnessed the abuse. 5 council employees were alleged to be involved.
I was called a black bastard by more than one person, the black man, dark cloud, dark friend, and black cloud.
One councillor, the deputy leader, Mildred Brown, was also on the list.
She called me black bastard, but she did apologise.
She's resigned from the Labour Party and lost her council positions. The cobbler also heard allegations that she tried to get a letter about her behaviour withdrawn. It was sent to the regional Labour HQ by Croxdale Labour Party. Councillor Joe Anderson is chair of Croxdale. One evening last year, he says he had a visit from Councillor Brown.
I said, look, Mildred, I declared an interest at the meeting. I'm sorry, I can't say anything about it. I never seen the letter they sent, and that's it. She says, you're a chairman, you know what you can do. You can get this letter rescinded and finished. I said, I can't, and you know that. Then she started shouting. She was going to take them down with, I don't know what she meant by that. I said, so be it.
The police investigated allegations that she tried to blackmail Joe Anderson with an anonymous letter. No charges were brought and the case was dropped. Councillor Brown also declined to be interviewed in this programme. In a written statement, she noted that everything she had said to Mr. Williams
was always meant with the affection he knew he could expect from me.
If her banter had been misinterpreted,
I would have immediately and sincerely apologised.
She had taken the anonymous letter to Joe Anderson
to indicate how we were all vulnerable to malicious gossip, but at no time did I threaten him with anything.
So, the deputy leader has gone. What about the officers? No action has been taken against any of them. Eventually, the council settled the case for £6,500.
I think it was quite disgracefully handled. I think it gives me the impression that they didn't think it mattered if they behaved in an abusive way.
The council says there had been
a formal investigation over 15 months. There was no racial abuse.
And 17 of Mr. Williams' colleagues had corroborated this. 17 is a large number.
Mr. Sheasmith and the personal representative asked me who was present on 2 occasions when these words were uttered. I said there was many people present, but as far as I'm concerned, they did not hear what was said. And Mr. Sheasmith said, well, we'd better interview them in any event.
All this has made the cobbler a lot of enemies and a lot of friends.
Well, I think he's got a point, probably, hasn't he? No smoke without fire, as they say, like, you know.
To me, he's an idiot, in my opinion. I mean, he talks about people he doesn't know nothing about.
There seems to be a general feeling in Durham that things are wrong and that he's making some good, valid points.
The cobbler has tried to keep the issue separate from his family.
Well, I tend to keep it quiet in the house, you know, we see it on the telly and in the newspapers, and the kids think it's quite humorous. But, you know, once I get home, I try to switch it off.
You haven't got the strength, have you? You haven't been eating your sprouts. It's off. You would have seen old Mrs. Clark died.
Oh, she got away, did she?
Aye.
Oh, bless her. Been coming here for years, ever since I've been here.
I'm thinking of standing to be councillor for this ward.
Gives him like a cliff, so you cannot do anything like that.
You just wait and see.
Money, you'd expect the contract to go out to tender. It didn't, because Durham said he was the only person in Britain specialising in a kind of big screen known as 870 when he was given the contract. But around the same time, he was one of 10 filmmakers in the running to make a similar film in Scotland. He didn't get the job. Sands Films in London, who made this big screen film in 1997, say they would have been interested in the Durham contract. They're surprised it wasn't put out to tender.
That's unheard of. The principle of going for tender is precisely to check and to verify who is able to deliver the goods that the council wish to acquire. So you cannot be satisfied by your own personal feeling or assumed knowledge.
The council says it had checked and had gone for
UK, or even better, local talents and suppliers.
the Scottish project had foreign involvement and was,
An IMAX film, which is a much more expensive format.
in fact, the Scottish film was shot in IMAX and 870, the same format as Durham's. But filmmakers say it's not even necessary to specialise in any particular one.
An experienced film producer who's done feature films and who has experience of filmmaking would be able, without any difficulty whatsoever, of producing a large format film by hiring the right technicians and by obtaining the advice.
Putting the film out to tender probably would have shown this. The council says Mr. Quayle came forward with the concept of the entire visitor centre, not just the film. The district auditor said, despite his unique proposals, the council should have done much more to test whether there were alternatives. So, did Durham assume Mr. Quayle was making the film? The council has always said no. Well, Mr. Quayle billed the council for £3,800 for a deposit on a camera in 1997, a year before he got the contract. That's unusual because this was during pre-production.
Pre-production, there's lots of other things to do. You may be inquiring about the availability of the equipment. You may be negotiating a price and say, right, we want, for 6 months, starting in April, in 2 years' time, whatever. You negotiate your deal, but you don't commit because you don't know yet whether you're doing the film anyway. So you wouldn't go ahead. You're just making inquiries.
In fact, Durham was paying for items also being used in a film in Cumbria Mr. Quayle was making. The camera and 3 consultants, who cost Durham almost £14,000 3 years ago, were also working in Cumbria. This intertwining of the projects could make it difficult to trace whether Durham's money was being properly spent. Mr. Quayle says council officers were informed. None of this implies any wrongdoing on Mr. Quayle's part. It's the council's actions that we have questioned. Whether it was protecting taxpayers' interests by paying for these items well before a producer was appointed. The council says it was. The cobbler says the relationship between the chief executive and the filmmaker is crucial here.
Mr. Shearsmith and Brendan Quayle had a tennis partnership and they were very close friends.
Why would that be important? Because council officials must not be a party to decisions that benefit friends or family. Mr. Quayle flatly denies that they were friends. They had played tennis in a group occasionally up to 1998. But it's claimed Colin Shearsmith asked for a fume check on a friend's boiler early in 1998 and that the friend was Brendan Quayle. Mr. Williams says he did the test.
The day in question, I received a telephone call from the chief executive, Mr. Shearsmith. Could I pop along and see him? And Mr. Shearsmith says, could you go and do a gas test at an appliance for a Mr. Brendan Quayle? I said, well, I can't refuse. I says, I can't refuse, it's part of my job. And he said, is that understood? I said, oh yes. And during the conversation, he said, well, he's a friend of mine.
The council said the chief executive had, on occasion, played tennis in a group of businessmen and professional people.
One of whom was Mr. Quayle, but they are not friends.
Had he asked for the fume check?
Absolutely not. Mr. Quayle had the conversation directly with the council's health and safety officer.
That is totally wrong. Mr. Shearsmith asked me to attend and do an investigation of this property.
Last year, the cobbler believed the shop was under surveillance because he'd been making waves. A police team was operating in the offices of the local MP, Jerry Steinberg, across the road. The cobbler complained to the police.
It all died down for a few weeks, and then I got another tip-off that the police were back in there surveilling the shop again. Not the police, the drug squad. So then I contacted the police again and told them that the surveillance operation was back on. I wasn't very happy.
Have you ever had any involvement with drugs?
Not at all, not whatsoever, no.
Durham police say Tony Martin was not under surveillance. They declined to say whether the shop was being watched. Jerry Steinberg refused to comment. Then there were whispers of political bias because he was getting legal advice from a prospective Tory candidate.
I haven't got a political bone in my body. You know, I've never bothered with politics at all. But basically, this guy was the only guy who would listen to what I had to say. Hello, girls.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Very well. How's yourself?
Have you got any more new...
Yeah, there's a few new ones. That one's from the New Statesman.
A big target these days is the council's finances.
They can't cope with them. The district auditor has stated they're nearly bankrupt.
True? Well, the council's reserves have plummeted. They were at £5 million a few years ago. They're now around £1 million. Late last year, its cash balances were low. There was no money for capital projects. We took our financial information to a top company of urban regeneration lawyers in London.
Clearly, it's serious because the district auditor expresses a view that it is unclear where the balance of the money is going to come from. But it's clear that there is a funding problem. That's certainly the case.
The council says it has
been aware for some time of the need to address its spending.
For 2 years, the chief executive had been
overhauling the operation of the whole council.
There was now
a sound base from which the council can go forward.
Big schemes always mop up extra money. £450,000 on that land in Claypath, £420,000 on the price of Millennium City. The council said cost savings would make up for that. Recently, most of the £1.2 million contingency fund for Millennium City had been spent, yet the project was less than half complete. The money it was to get originally from AMEC, its partner in Walkergate, fell by almost £1.7 million last year. The proposed multiplex cinema in Walkergate still has no operator. That could dent future profits. Ultimately, it's the councillors who will bear responsibility for any losses.
In a project of this size, I would certainly expect elected members to take a very much more hands-on approach, bearing in mind the level of risk. And again, it's clear that in this case, for example, in relation to the Land Assembly, that there was no detailed member involvement. The cash position of the council as a result of the Millennium Project and the failure of some of the conditions precedent is very serious.
The council says
councillors take all major decisions on schemes.
the contingency fund was